So bringing this back to the subject of today's show, are there some authority figures in Black purity culture that are seen as kind of above reproach? Does it seem? Are there people who it seems like if you accuse them of something, the initial idea is it couldn't possibly be that person. They're
Bill
so
Cosby.
yeah.
Every
So
major black
tie this in
pastor.
for us, Jenna.
Yeah. Every major non-female pastor, preacher, bishop, who have you, that has, a prominence and a face and a stance at the pulpit, all of those guys, each one of them that you would directly, like if they were accused of something and it was on a hush hush, or the congregation, or that, reverend pool or pulpit of men keeping it hush hush, and then if that word got out, then of course that so and so would never do such a thing. That person must be trying to get money out of them, or lying, or whatever, trying to get something. Yeah,
Mhm.
classically.
I have also noticed, and I noticed it specifically with, what I was talking about earlier with Bill Cosby, but there is a mentality in the Black community of like, well, we have to protect our own. We have
Yeah.
to stand up for our own. To the point where if a Black person, usually a Black man, gets accused of something like that,
R. Kelly.
of R. Kelly, oh my goodness. I saw a documentary about that. That was just
Ugh, I know.
ugly, gross.
Mhm.
But it's like they just want to back him up just for the sake of, well, he's a brother. I don't want to. We get lambasted as a community by everybody anyway. We can't let him get thrown under the bus for this, even if he did it. They just
Right.
come up with whatever excuses, and it's it's tribalism.
It is.
It is, and it's
Some
mm,
No, somehow, yes, like there is this idea that, every other society, everyone else outside of the Black community is like looking at us like we're just the worst of the worst. So we always have to speak and hold up our own no matter what. And I firmly disagree with that, because if we see a Black man, i.e., Bill Cosby, i.e., R. Kelly, i.e., Michael Jackson, i.e., all of those people that have done some sexual harm or some harm in general against another person, yet we're like, well, we don't want to see another Black man in jail. Well, I mean, I understand the sentiment, but I don't agree. And it's disgusting to even allow or continue to allow said person to just continuously get away with that. And they still continuously exhibit those disgusting things that they are been accused of for years now. And
especially when the people that they usually hurt are Black women. I mean,
yeah,
that's still hurting your own. That doesn't.
right, right. Where's the line?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Ugh. God, I could go on about that for a
I
while.
know, I know.
Okay, so one thing that was in your notes that I wanted to ask about, because I see this in a lot of other communities also, is the tendency for high purity culture groups to marry earlier than usual, possibly for the wrong reasons or to the wrong person, and to try to maintain the relationship for longer than is probably a good idea.
Yeah.
What thoughts do you have on the stigma around singleness?
Well, this is it kind of hits home, because I remember recalling kind of having a similar conversation as far as regards to divorce and things like that, but just with my sister, sorry, I lost my train of thought briefly, but I struggle with this because there seems to be a non-belief in divorce when it comes to Black culture. Like, no matter what type of issues or trauma or there have you
You
always have to
stand by your man.
stand by exactly, stand by your man no matter what. And I recall having this conversation with my sister. Mind you, she's getting married soon. And not to say that I have issue with the guy she's marrying. Love him. He's like a brother to me. He's a great guy. But I asked her point blank, like, and they've had like a fight in the midst of that moment. I asked her, if you feel that you're unhappy now and you're having struggles now, like, how are you going to be when you guys are married? Like, I wouldn't want you, because that's my sister, I love her. I wouldn't want you to hang on to this relationship if you're going to be depressed and upset or harmed in some way, not at all implying that there would be any physical harm, but emotional harm is just as detrimental too. And she point blank said, "Well, I don't believe in divorce. Like I mean, that's just another something about statistic or whatever." And it just flew out of my head or flew over my head. But when saying that you'll stand by your man, as you said, and cling on to this relationship, no matter the abuse or the turmoil that happens around it, is scary. And that's something that is firmly driven with the belief, Christian belief, that divorce is not a thing, or it should not be a thing. And marrying, as far as marrying young, I don't have too much direct experience with that, but I know that is certainly something that has been not necessarily a custom, but is a thing. But marrying within your own and making sure that that man is just as godly as you are, or is a godly person, um continuing that cycle and sticking with your own. And that's something I've had a heavy problem with, because to my family, I've been classically known to date and have relationships outside my race. And obviously in some circles under the Christian Black culture, marrying or being outside your race is kind of like a slap in the face to say, like, oh, what's wrong with Black men? This is why Black men are seen so negatively. And it's funny how a Black woman would get that conversation, but when a Black guy goes outside their race, it's kind of like a good thing, or they're still the double standard.
That
But
he's
anyway,
marrying up.
yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly,
Yeah.
he's
No,
marrying up.
I have heard my mother, who is not Black, has told me some of the stories that she didn't hear directly, but somewhat overheard. She grew up in a very mixed congregation. She and my dad both did. They went to different congregations, but they met at the same Kingdom Hall, the same church. Um, so they had a lot of the same people that they ran around with, and he was just a star Jehovah's Witness young man. So of course, all the older Black ladies in his congregation were just looking forward to seeing who he was gonna get with, and he ended up with my Latina but very much white passing mom. And I guess I never heard any full stories, but there was definitely an implication from her that caused a little bit of friction, even among the supposedly not even a little bit racially divided Jehovah's Witness community. So,
Wow.
yeah.
So the reason I was curious about this is because Rudy, you were formerly part of Jehovah's Witnesses. I was formerly Mormon, and there is a lot of
Cult
marrying very young in the Mormon church, especially for the young singles who go to BYU and end up dating for the purpose of trying to date and marry a returned missionary. And there is so much of a emphasis on maintaining a strong appearance, especially especially when you're going to church functions, right? You want to present the happy family, and you want to present, oh look, I was able to find a partner at 20. What's wrong with you? It's never explicitly spoken that way, but that's what the idea is. If you made it through BYU all 4 years and got your degree but couldn't find anybody to marry, what happened? Right. And there's a definite a stigma attached to why have you been single for as long as you have. And then once you are there, as you pointed out, that whole I don't believe in divorce, where a friend of mine who is recently going through a divorce, the question that was asked was not, how can we support you in your decision, but why couldn't you maintain that marriage? Like what,
Oof.
and
Yeah.
I'm getting from the reactions that you guys have heard this kind of thing before, where the blame then is on the, why did you call it quits? Why did you give up on this? And instead of the questions we should be asking, it's like, what can we do to help? What really happened behind closed doors that we're not aware of?
Yeah, there's within the Jehovah's Witness community, it's weird because I grew up with like very conflicting messages when it comes to like getting married early. Like there was talking points saying like take your time, you'll find the right person eventually, and there's no rush because in paradise you're gonna live forever, so who cares if you get married now anyway. But at the same time, there were like that's what was said at the platform. In practice, I knew people that got engaged after dating for 6 months and got divorced like a year later. You're also not supposed to divorce as a Jehovah's Witness, but yeah, young marriages. So it's kind of inevitable. I feel like I'm getting off track now. I'm sorry.
No, no. No, that's
No.
interesting. I'm glad you kind of shared that too, because I know with my background in the Christian faith, it wasn't so much a stronghold of getting married young. It's just very fervent, especially in the Black church, that or at least I won't say all, but at least certain small groups that marrying within your race and making sure that they are Christian as well is absolute. And then one issue I do have, and I haven't been able to kind of listen in because my sister is presently going through this. Premarital counseling is a thing where you have to have so many various sessions prior to that pastor or preacher marrying you. My mom I don't know if my mother went through it her first marriage, but with her second marriage she did. But since they were both widows, they only had that one session since they had experience with marriage. And mind you, they didn't lose their first marriage because of divorce. Both lost their first marriage because of the death of their spouse. So,
Wow.
but yeah. So with now my sister's going through her sessions. I don't know how many, where they do it once a month for like an hour with the preacher. Not sure or absolutely knowledgeable of what the questions are, but it's definitely, to my understanding, is rooted as to it being God accepted, how you would go about an issue with your spouse, and how would you pray together, how would you present yourself to your church, and how will you involve your kids. And I'm like, how is this good marital counseling in regards to how they will make their relationship last or work? Because, and then to back that with, as long as you keep praying for God to keep your family together, then you yourself as a godly woman or as a godly man need to keep that family together no matter what. It's
Yeah.
crazy. So that's a stickler for me.
So I had a question for you, Jenna, regarding your work in healthcare. You said you were in healthcare, and then we'll touch on this really quick, and then we'll get to our calls. We know there are glaring inequalities in healthcare access. How do we see these inequalities show up around sexual health?
Um, oh, yeah. Again, my sister's, I myself, my sister and my mother are nurses. My sister actually works in the OBGYN department for women's health. I myself work in health education surrounding around weight management, but I still have, background knowledge is working in that department and various others. But with, from what I have heard through my congregation growing up, what I have learned for myself, and what I have learned and throughout the history of Black people and healthcare. Obviously, we have strong issues and with it, but the treatment towards, especially Black women alone, is it's a glaring difference in how their care is given and how they can access that care. Is a clear difference from other from our white counterparts. So the idea that Black people in general and a Black woman in general is seen as strong and tough when we express pain or we express something wrong with us, it's written off very quickly versus our white counterparts. And so we're not given or being met with the same type of treatment or care or following care as the other. So it's no surprise to me that when we are met with unintentional pregnancy, or we have higher rates of cervical cancer or higher rates of breast cancer or higher issues and rates of everything involving our reproductive health, that the access there is lacking, and the actual fairness of following care and actually addressing that said woman's need is failing. So yeah, and the fact that also, in addition to that, just to relate it to the religious aspect, because we often are, myself and my mom and sister are met with this question often, as far as where the idea of just praying about it, just keeping it and praying about it, because since we have such a disconnect and such a issue with healthcare for Black people in general, we hold on to the standard or stereotypical standard of Black people holding on to their faith and just praying about it and ask God to just heal my body, and if let it be, if I get over this cancer, fine, if I do, fine too. But just letting it go and let God is also dangerous too, because we are not actively advocating for our health. And when you fail to do that, even for yourself, especially if that said provider is not doing it for you, then you're doing more injustice to yourself than anyone else can do for you.
See, this is what happens when you have someone who's used to working with nonprofits coming in to do secular sexuality. Because my mind goes to the current events questions and the government questions and all that, and we often forget. I often forget. It's like, you know what? We're supposed to be talking about the religious aspects and the sexuality aspects of it, and not just the legislation. So I'll get that right by the next time I get on here. But we have another call.